The only joke I think better than that is Dave Chappelle's kicker in the pussy.
Oh, it's so funny because I criticized that joke in the book. Well, I'll explain why. By
the way, I'm dying to read your fucking book now. You know this is going to be the only book I read this year. Hey guys, the Tops Off World Tour is coming to an end in 2024, and then, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, I will be taking a long break from touring, but not before January 18th in Tucson, Arizona, El Paso, Texas, San Antonio, Amarillo that first week, Casper, Wyoming, Loveland, Colorado, Colorado Springs, Rio Rancho, New Mexico, and then me and Tom, February 10th, are in Las Vegas for the big game at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. The following week, Bakersfield, Reno, San Francisco, Stockton. I will see you guys on the road. Tops Off World Tour. Enjoy the podcast. Can I see your book?
Yeah, sure.
So you know I'm a fan of yours. Even though we didn't start off as fans, I think I talked shit about you.
Yeah, and I mentioned that in the book.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
I read that. Wait, what was the thing I did?
So I wrote a piece called something about, I didn't write the headline, but the headline was something like, does comedy need to be funny, or how funny does comedy need to be? And because
Bert Kreischer's not that funny, he seems to be doing very well.
So then, and it's about comedy that was not always going for laughs in certain ways, or it's like Nanette and they're withholding laughs, or shows like Atlanta, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And you were on The Bonfire.
Oh, come on. You gotta, that's like saying, Bert, when you were in a gang, you beat a guy up. I go, yeah, but he can kill me, buddy.
I know it. But so you made fun of it. All of you made fun of it. So then when I had you on my podcast, I just wanted to be like, not to like criticize, just was curious. Do you remember said that? And then I wouldn't say clear the air. Because like
I reached out to her. I reached out to Nanette to be on my podcast.
Yeah.
And she said no, because she said my name's Hannah. So don't call me Nanette. No.
Also, they are they now.
Cool.
Just
I know it's going to be a rough one for me to, like, especially if I don't know they.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for me to remember that if I don't really bring they up all the time, it's going to be hard for me to properly they them.
It was just it was a thing that very late in the book process, they released a press release about the new special that used.
By the way, when you say they, I think of her and her they partner. They and their
partner.
Them. I think of them.
Yeah.
No, it's them. So if it's her, if it's those two over there that like to drink tea and play with dogs, it's them.
Yes.
Them was with one of them is really famous, also like a great director.
I believe so. Yeah. I will say this. Who's this? Just kidding.
Bert. How have we not done a who's on first with a they them?
I would not.
And by the way, where the fuck is Fox when you need them for? If they've got a comedy channel, right? Mm-hmm. Fox does comedy.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's called. Look, you know I'm the most fair centrist dude in the world. But it's like, yo, even Fox. Like, there's good Fox comedy that they're missing out on. Like, why do they just go I don't need to know about fucking vaccines.
Well, I mean, I guess the closest is, what's his face? Gutfeld.
He's good.
You like Gutfeld?
Yeah, right?
The biggest problem with Gutfeld, regardless of my political disagreements with him, is that because they don't hire union writers.
He's a they too?
So here, this is a good way of understanding to get better at they
are confusing.
You're allowed to say they always for people.
Yeah, you are.
You could be like, where's Bert? Oh, they went to the market or whatever. That existed before.
You can also see this is the funniest thing. They are going to get more mad at thou than thine, because they know that I don't. That I'm like, I'll do it like I do it to my daughter's friends. Like my daughter's got a bunch of thems. And I'll do it to them when this comes up. Like, I don't mind doing it at all. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the mental, that Mae Martin is a they.
Yes.
And I love it.
You love it.
I love it. I love it. No, I love that. I love when I hear it done right for them.
Mae's really interesting because, like, I had Mae on my podcast when they were promoting the show that they had on Netflix. And
it's got to be confusing a little bit to you too, right?
I know, but I will say, like all languages. But the thing that was interesting is they for a while were not good at it either. They would be talking about their character on the show, which is based on them, and they would be like, "She did this, she did that," and I was like, and that was part of what the show was about. Was like they're proving that it's not like everyone is figuring out.
Everyone's
these
figuring
things.
it out. When did you start? When did you get into comedy?
Like just watching it.
Yeah.
I'd say. I mean, I don't remember a time I wasn't into it, but I remember watching Bring the Pain and being like, I like stand up. I'll watch stand up, and then like Comedy Central was on, so I was just like would watch it all the time, and I watched
Bring
Comic
the Pain
View.
was so fucking good.
Then I was like a kid, like a true like.
I was in college. How old were you?
I was probably like 10 or 11. So like, what the fuck did I know?
You never even met a black person.
But I was like, you can tell that something is special. And then you watch Bigger and Blacker. That is unbelievable. I don't know if anyone has got better at joke writing than he was at that time with Bigger and Blacker.
And then this is the problem with fame.
Yeah.
Is he got so famous and you can't say no to the money.
Yeah.
And people want the name more than they want the jokes. The name sells more. Like when you think about people who signed huge deals at Netflix, and I don't know anyone's business, so I don't pretend to know anyone's business. But when you look at like, I'm trying to think of a safe place to land. Because you know what, I mean, Chappelle's the example, but he's still so good at comedy, in my opinion. I believe Chappelle's so good at comedy still.
I think he's a very talented person. He has material issues of a person who's putting out so much specials. He put out more specials in the last 7 years than Chris Rock has put out, period.
Really? But I think he felt like he had some catching up to do.
Yeah, I guess so. It just sort of like, but then that's part of why he talks about the exact same subject over and over again. I
don't. Yeah. I will tell you as a professional comedian, I notice when I bring up a lot of subjects.
Yeah.
But then I do notice the ones that get the most traction.
Sure.
So like, when we did they did a roast of me, everyone like did an impression of me, and it was like, Isla said this, blah 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 blah. Laugh at your own joke, and then I was like, yeah, but those work still very well.
And it is your life, and kids age, so like I think that is different than when you're talking about topics.
Yeah.
Right. If you talk about the same topics, I think it's different than talking about parenting. I think, at least in my opinion,
it may be, but I mean. Once again, I'm like getting nervous to talk about Friends.
Yeah,
but I noticed certain dudes harp on an issue, and it seems to be what their fans respond to. I'm nervous to say it because I go like I don't know the safe place to land, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to think
of a person who talks. So it's like let's say Jim Gaffigan and like food jokes.
There we go. That's a good one, and it's safe.
Yeah,
or Fluffy.
Yeah,
Fluffy has found. Sometimes you find the people that dig the shit you do.
Yeah,
and then by the way, what's even crazier is I'll say this. Then you find that you've painted yourself into a corner, and then certain subjects you go to broach, and then you're like last night I said the words fingering a pussy, and I watched the girl go in the front row go, Bert. And I went, wait, how do you think I got the kids?
Yeah.
But they just don't see me as that. They see me as something.
You're allowed to have sex in your jokes, but not like be sexual.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can like enjoy having sex in your jokes.
I can have sex and I can fuck up at sex and not be good at sex.
Yeah.
But the second I
I mean, I do think it's a give and take, right? It's like having more fans can be a prison, but also having more fans can be a gift because the audience will listen to more and they're willing to let you stretch or whatever, right? Like I feel like your closer in your last special was like so long, and you like imagine doing that 20 years. It would be the crazy. You would never be invited back. But I do think there gets to a point where you play big enough venues that sometimes now you're attracting people who are not fans of your anymore. They just saw it's a comedy show at a big venue, and that can be dangerous.
That's actually not a thing.
Yeah, what?
No one casually buys an arena
really?
ticket. No one casually buys an arena ticket. I'll promise you that. I wish they did. I wish you could sell casual arena tickets. The arenas.
Yeah,
people buy casual comedy club tickets.
Yeah, of course.
People do not buy casual theater tickets.
That to me, theater is for fans, and like I think theater is like the sweet spot.
What happens is, and I think this is what you're talking about, is people will buy a casual. Once again, I have love for all these people, but we're just talking esoterically about comedy. People will buy a casual Matt Rife ticket to see what it is. People will buy a casual Dave Chappelle ticket to see what it is. No one is buying a casual Joe Coy ticket. It is his fans.
Yeah.
And so like Joe, myself, Bargatze. People will buy a casual Bargatze ticket.
Now they definitely will.
Now they definitely will, because once you get that famous, like the Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle tour, you couldn't get tickets for. But I will say there's no one in that audience that's a bigger fan of me than those two guys.
Yeah.
And the diehards, they didn't get tickets.
Yeah, no way.
They didn't get tickets. It's the people that go, that don't know anything about comedy. That, like my buddy Hank.
Yeah.
Okay. My buddy Hank's like, or my daughter's friends. My daughter's friend Daisy goes, hey, can you get me Matt Rife tickets? And I go, Daisy, name all the comics you know. She goes, you and Matt Rife. And I was like, and then she goes, oh wait, Shane Gillis. I go, she knows Shane because he caught her drinking beer on tour.
Sure.
And so I go, so the three people you know is the one guy that busted you drinking.
Yeah.
Me and your best friend's dad and Matt Rife. And she was like that. That's the dangerous territory, in my opinion. And I love Matt, and I think Matt would much rather the dangerous territory than no success.
Yeah.
But the dangerous territory is when you're selling tickets to people who are trying to figure out what it is, and go like, and I think Louis got into that place.
I think a lot of people do. I mean, I think about a lot also with specials, right? It's like you tour, and you're like, oh, these are my fans. They get it. They have a context for how I operate. Then you put things on Netflix, and you have no control over how people see you, and they'll just be like, oh, Dave Chappelle's famous. I guess I should watch one comedy special a year, and it's this, and you have no context for it. And then so what happens is both that person has a bad experience, but also like Dave Chappelle has this perception of like, well, why are you watching it? You should just not watch it if you don't like it. It's like, well, because you're the most famous comedian.
He is the most, and that's why he gets the big money. Dave Chappelle gets the big money because in the hopes, this is, I think, how the business model works. And so let's pay Dave Chappelle $20 million to do a special. And then let's pay Tom Segura $1 million. And I think those are probably accurate numbers.
Sure.
And then let's hope that on that $20 million investment, Dave Chappelle brings us 20 million new watchers to his. And out of that 20 million, we convert 7 million viewers that become comedy fans. And out of that 3 million people watch Tom Segura's special. And then we get our return investment on Tom. We actually underpaid Tom because more people. That's why Amy got those big deals. Look, this is really inside baseball, and I love this more than anything. But it wasn't. I'm sure Amy probably believes because she was the greatest female comedian that's ever lived. She posted that the other day.
Oh, really?
She's pulled up. Amy posted, "I am the greatest female comedian that's ever lived."
She said greatest?
It's her words, not mine. This show is sponsored by DraftKings. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official betting partner of the NFL playoffs, is bringing you an offer that'll help make the playoffs electrifying. New customers can bet $5 on any game and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Let me tell you, I screwed up so bad at the very beginning. It was all I know is I was going to put $10,000 on the Bucks to make it to the Super Bowl, and the payoff was $1 million. I did not make that bet, but the bet, I'm not going to tell you who to bet. I'm not going to tell you what to bet. All I'll tell you, this week, Bucks Eagles, Bucks getting 2.5 points. I talked on the phone to Baker Mayfield the other day. That's all I'm saying. He seems very confident. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code Bertcast. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with the code Bertcast. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit www.1800gambler.net. New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NEW YORK or text HOPE-NEW YORK 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus ages vary by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/football for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. I just went and saw the Eagles at the Forum. Steely Dan Open. It was the best night of my life. More importantly, it was the best night because I didn't stress about tickets. You shouldn't have to worry when buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the best and easiest way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun you're going to have. Get images of your seat before you buy. That was so important to us. So you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. I'm telling you right now, Joe Coy, my boy, is at the Forum February 16th. that is a great time to get tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Bertcast for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code BERTCAST for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Pull it up. Amy posted, I am the greatest female comedian that's ever lived.
She said greatest?
It's her words, not mine.
I guess that's like, I blame Chappelle calling himself the greatest comedian of all time.
Well, hold on. I'm going to get so in the fucking weeds.
That
as a black dude, you, Kevin Hart, and Chris Rock can fuck around with that joke. That's what they were doing. They were walking goats on stage.
Yeah.
And goat is a cultural thing.
Yeah.
That's like LeBron's the goat. Like that. They can do that. You don't see Mulaney walking a goat on stage with him. Funny. It would be fucking hilarious. But first of all of his fans would be like, I'm all into Anime Rescue also. But so they do it. But when she called herself the greatest female comedian that ever lived, I think immediately you put yourself, immediately you let people do the numbers for you.
Yeah.
And so she could have just, I think she was getting in trouble for Hamas and.
She could have said she's the biggest, or termed like biggest selling, right? I don't know how many women have sold out Madison Square Garden.
She's the biggest selling comedian. She is the most successful comedian of all time.
Oh, okay. So that is true.
I am the most
Well, in terms of stand-up ticket sales, I assume for the next
few I would argue Taylor Tomlinson's.
I think Taylor will be.
I think Taylor might be already.
I have no idea how many. Taylor, I think she's basically going like, I played arenas. There weren't women playing arenas before me.
She played arenas when they counted.
Yeah.
Not to say that they don't count for me, but like she played arenas when
very few people were.
It was Louis, her.
Yeah.
And now Dane.
Now I wrote in the book by the time I finished it.
We need to talk about this book. Keep going. I just want to make sure.
18 people sold out. 18 people headlined Madison Square Garden. 18 acts, and already 2 have done it since I've wrapped copy of it. And that was like 5 months ago. Dave Chappelle did it. Andrew Schultz is playing Madison Square Garden.
I think he's doing 2 shows.
That's like that is such a radical difference from even 10 years ago when like Amy was doing, which again is a big deal. Like
I'm going to argue that Amy doing it 10 years ago is way bigger than Sebastian doing 4 of them.
Yeah.
I think Amy doing it then, she had to, you know what it's like? It's the difference of getting water in the 1800s versus getting water in 1970.
Yeah.
You know, where you're like, oh, you just drink it out of the hose.
Yeah, it's like the 4-minute mile thing, right? It's like once people started doing it, they figured out like how I assume touring agents were like, well, this is how we build to it, which is like, I was like, I wonder if Bert will play Madison Square Garden next tour, and you haven't announced it, so I don't want you to leak it, but like, or will be 2 tours from now, but like, it's not unfathomable that you would do that.
No, it's not. It's not, and also you can also look at someone's. I mean, this is really in the weeds, but you can look at someone's ego, and what they like and what they don't like. Like I doubt Shane Gillis will ever do Madison Square Garden. He's just not who he is. He's not an arena guy. He doesn't want to be an arena guy. He likes comedy. I wouldn't be shocked if he did this theater tour and then went back to clubs. But that's who he is, you know? I doubt Rogan will ever do Madison Square. I take that back.
No, he did it.
He did it?
I think it's also a lot of people get to it. They say they don't want to do it, but then you're like, what if I like doing it?
Oh, it's fun as fuck. It's fun as doing arenas is way more fun than anything you'll ever do. And I would argue it translates translates quicker to the medium of Netflix. It translates from what people see on Netflix. That venue is so much more the same thing they've seen on Netflix than a theater or a comedy club.
Yeah.
In a comedy club, everything's loosey-goosey. You're having drinks, there's noise, people are walking around. And you have to be bigger.
Yeah.
Sebastian is and I mean this out of all respect, and everything I'm saying out is out of respect.
Yes.
But Sebastian is the ultimate club comic.
Yeah.
When Sebastian was in clubs, you did not follow him. You still don't follow him.
Yeah.
But when he was hot, because he was Dane was the ultimate club
I can't even
comic.
imagine seeing Sebastian in a club doing that act out. It must feel like
it owned the room.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
It filled the room wall to wall, ceiling to floor. It was fucking fun. I mean, you'd sit in the back and be like, he one time told a bit. We were both getting our houses redone. Very different size houses.
Sure.
But we were both getting our houses redone.
Wait, Sebastian?
Me and Sebastian.
Yeah, and his house is wild.
His house was, no, at the time it was just like a $5 million house.
But not even like crazy. Like the design of his houses has always been.
Oh, yeah.
I've always just, it's fascinating because like people think of Sebastian's one type of guy and then his house looks like a Tim Burton museum.
Yeah. Well, that's his wife. His wife is a very artistic, beautiful, amazing artist.
Yeah, no.
And so we had both witnessed the same thing. And we both talked about it on stage. And my version, and I think it leaned to like my sensibility, was about these social differences in work and what we do for a living. And it was about this guy sweeping up and not really doing anything. It was the fact that you'd be paying someone to rebuild a house, but all he was doing was sweeping. Yeah. And then do you comment? You are lucky enough. Like I was trying to find the social story in there. Sebastian did the same bit. I can
imagine it.
But he goes, I come around the corner. This guy is sweeping.
Exactly. It's exactly the joke I imagined him doing.
The fucking room.
And he's got a broom.
Who's got a broom? Is that my broom? Are you using my broom? I mean, it was like so big. And I was crying laughing. But in saying that, and I've seen Sebastian in arenas. He fills an arena too. Yeah. But smaller Louis C.K. in arena is the quintessential arena act, in my opinion, because what happens is it plays to the screen. Everyone watches the screens.
Oh, interesting.
Just like you do Netflix. And so small movements play really big in an arena, where when you take that same movement into a club, they're not looking at your eyes, they're looking at your body.
Yeah, and you have to talk slower because the laughs and talking slower works better in film things than it does live.
Yeah, but dude, we're 22 minutes in. You're my favorite podcast I've ever done. I could, we've probably lost everyone. We lost anyone liberal with the they, thems. We lost anyone who's now going like, we lost all fucking, everyone's like, Amy's the biggest fucking female comic? Amy's going to text me and be like, why did you have to give me all that hate? You know what I said? I'm the greatest female comic, not the biggest. That implies size.
No, I'm the biggest, not the greatest.
Oh yeah, whatever. Taylor's about to be the biggest.
Yeah, 100%.
She's about to, her and Nate Bargatze are going to redefine everything that anyone knows about stand-up comedy.
In what way? Just in terms of how big they're going to be?
They're clean. They're funny. They don't curse. They don't party.
Does Taylor not curse?
She'll curse, but she's not like...
She's like dirty. She does like what...
Like, I got a tennis ball stuck in my pussy. She's not like that. Halston liked that. But like and Taylor, I'm sorry if I'm giving away her business model, but like I did the Boston Garden, and sold it out, and was very proud of myself. Thank you. Sold it to the ceiling, and Taylor chose not to do it, and instead did like 9 shows at the fucking theater that was 3,500.
Yeah.
And I did the math, and I was like, she outsold me exponentially.
Yeah, and also even I think this is in the weeds, but I remember hearing that like the business model on arenas is hard because the taxes and all that stuff are super expensive.
The business model on arenas is difficult. Your overhead is insane.
Yeah. You
have to rent a stage, tour buses, a crew. You got a crew of 18 coming with you. You got 5 semis. You got 3 tour buses. However, it's fun as fucking shit. It's really fun.
Yeah.
It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. You get to do it once. You get to do it. You dump all your energy into it. And if you're like me and you can fucking take a bath in your gratitude, it is overwhelmingly filled with gratitude, where you go into the team store and they hook you up with all the gear. They give you all this gear for free. And then you get a jersey with your name on it. And you have these big backstage parties, and you get to use their gym and their steam room and their sauna and their polar plunge. And you get to go sit up in the morning and walk up to the top cheap seats and have your coffee and write jokes. And it's just fucking overwhelming. And then you go out on stage, you have 19,000 people losing their mind for you. And then when you rip your shirt off and you hear 19,000 people pop, it is fucking, and so yes, I absolutely adore it. For someone like Taylor, I can see how she's like.
What will happen to Taylor will be somewhat like happened to Taylor Swift, which is eventually you get so famous and that you just have to go to bigger rooms, or otherwise you the fans need to be going somewhere.
Yeah.
And if she keeps on playing theaters, there'll be a black market, or there'll be whatever the gray market on tickets will be like insane. So she'll have to play bigger venues, almost I think and then it's like if she keeps on getting bigger then you have to do football stadiums. And then if you do, I mean, like there's no beyond football stadiums. Like that's why Taylor Swift is so insane, which is essentially she's so famous that there's no football stadium big enough for her.
And it's people should be paying attention to what's happening.
Yeah.
The two biggest comics in our business are Taylor and Nate.
Yeah.
And I'm once again, love for everyone. You can be me or Andrew Schultz, these chest-thumping promoters, right?
Yeah.
And congrats. We're doing arenas. We're big deals. Or you can be silently living in Tennessee, selling more tickets than anyone in our business. I mean, I believe Kevin Hart is the only person selling more tickets than Nate Bargatze. Kevin Hart is the only one. Only one. And I'm pretty familiar with numbers.
Yeah.
He is the only one selling more tickets, and he's Kevin Hart. Nate Bargatze maybe has a podcast that maybe 22,000 people listen to. I'm being very real. However, every 22,000 of those people travel to every single one of his shows and buy tickets for every fucking show he ever does.
It's so interesting. I mean, I've been a fan of Nate's for a really long time. I always thought there are certain comedians that, you know, I wrote a book about comedy. I know about a lot of comedians. I understand most of their moves. And there are like only a handful of comedians I think of as ineffable. Essentially, like I can't. And Nate is one, and Beth Stelling's the other one, which is like whatever they're doing.
Now you're gonna have to define ineffable.
Yeah, which is it's like I was wondering if you're gonna. No offense.
I thought it means you don't use the F word.
No. Yeah, they're like unfuckable, fuckwithable.
Yeah, and then I was like, no, Beth Stelling's very fuckable.
No, it is like it's a quality that can't be defined. Like Nate's stand-up. I mean, you can see this.
That's a really great definition of them.
Yeah, where their rhythms. Like a lot of comedians aren't telling jokes up there, but really, like Nate and Beth, more than almost any comedian I know, Hannibal sometimes does this, where you're getting laughs in like middle of sentences, and it's unclear what is happening, and it's just like they have this thing, and then, but to see how the level to which that works for Nate is like unbelievable.
It's
and
insane.
then his SNL monologue was so good.
I didn't see it.
It's really good.
Really, I gotta watch it. I saw the sketch he did as George Washington. That was fucking brilliant.
It's so funny. I love that sketch, but it's also like it's like someone at SNL was like, I got this down the middle, straightforward sketch, not trying to do anything different. It's a somewhat straightforward premise. Let me wait for Nate to come on. And it's doing really well, but it's an observation that's out there, right? Which is like, isn't it weird that we don't use the metric system? And it was just perfectly done, and he's like the perfect person for it.
He's brilliant, and I really mean that. Like he's brilliant, and he's just on. I mean this like, obviously these are all my friends. So as I talk, if I'm saying anything shitty, edit it out. But like, he is on the outside. And he lives on the outside. He's not like there's a list of comics that are probably hounding their agents to get them to host SNL.
Yeah.
That's a way the comics work. Every comic that you think is just casual marketer, they're all hardcore. Everyone is. And everyone's like, get me on SNL. I want to host SNL. I guarantee you Nate didn't ask for it. And they called him up and they're like, would you be interested? And he was like, actually, I know that happened. I know that Lauren watched his stand-up and was like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah.
And he's like, he should host SNL. And everyone's like, for real? And he's like, yeah. It's a fucking genius move. He was like, yeah, I kicked Gillis off. Let's get one of them in.
One of them.
When do you think Gillis will host SNL?
I don't know. I don't think I think he would have to get way bigger than he is now. No offense. He's quite, but you have to, I think, have a tenure of bigness.
He's at least 275.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
No, I think he needs he needs a year to ripen.
Yeah.
Of like his next hour will be fucking bangers.
But I think one, and it'll help if there's another SAG strike. I think that's a big part of it, which was like they.
Oh yeah.
But I think there is. I remember when Kumail hosted before that movie came out.
Kumail hosted?
Yeah, he hosted right before that movie came out.
He is still jacked as fuck. I saw him last night.
Yeah, but compared to what he was. Oh yeah.
He is such a strikingly good man.
Was he doing stand-up?
Yeah.
Did he tell you that I'm the reason he does stand-up again?
So it's your fault?
Yeah, it's my fault.
No, he didn't. Why would that happen?
Because he wasn't doing that much because he's a freaking comic book.
He's a great comedian.
Yeah, and so I had him do a live podcast essentially a year ago today, with the goal being like, we're going to do this podcast in front of people. He goes, I don't really do stand-up as much anymore. It's like, I anymore. And then we did this live podcast. And my goal was like, I'm going to have him essentially do jokes so that he remembers what it's like. And then he loved being in front of people. And he, you get that itch again. He's like, well, maybe I'll go up again. And then he just kept on doing it. And then obviously I think the strikes helped giving him time to do it. But then I definitely kickstarted a thing that he just had not prioritized.
He was great on stage last night.
He's so good.
He's always been a phenomenal comedian. In my opinion, I've always enjoyed watching him do stand-up. But also, from my perspective, I get to see the other side of the fence a little bit. I get to see the kid that maybe I went to high school with that didn't say much, and then when I left the room, destroyed me and my friends, right? So that's the fun part of me watching Kumail.
Yeah.
But his jawline is fucking great.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous. Like, I would love to look like him. He's just fucking, and I love that him and his wife are so in love. Like, I love so much about him.
Yeah. So when he hosted, then I was like, oh, cool. And then it felt like, I think Mulaney kicked it off where Lauren was like, maybe we should have stand-ups again, And then when Jerrod Carmichael hosted, I think even Jerrod was like, I'm the least famous person that's ever hosted this show.
Okay, let's talk about what happened with the Jerrod thing with Marin.
So, I don't know if you watched Jerrod.
I've never met Jerrod Carmichael. I don't think I have.
I've never met him either. Oh no, wait. I interviewed him many years ago because they did an episode of his show about Bill Cosby, and I was going to interview him about it. So I was like, oh, I'm here to interview about Bill Cosby. And I don't know if there was a miscommunication, but he was just like, why? And then we spent the entire interview arguing if that was a worthy premise for an interview. And I was like, okay, well, we'll print that. It was an interesting conversation. But then, so when you watch Rothaniel, for those who haven't watched
I've seen it. Yeah. And it was good. It was very soft. It was more like a spoken word.
It was tonal.
It seemed like he was trying to overproduce what Chappelle did in the Butterfly Effect.
Well, I think Chappelle, when I saw Butterfly Effect.
Butterfly Effect. What is it called? You know what I mean.
The one where I thought that one, Chappelle saw what Jerrod did with 8. Have you ever seen 8? The one that he did in the round?
No.
And I was like, Chappelle saw what Jerrod did in 8 and goes, that's my thing. Taking big pauses and being quiet.
Yeah.
And like, because straight up, like, because 8, Bo directed all of these, but like,
Bo Burnham's a fucking gangster.
Yeah, so
that motherfucker's good.
Yeah,
and I will say, the sweetest dude in the fucking world. That goes a really long way with me. If you're the kind of standoffy cunt that sits in the corner in Montreal and doesn't want to be bothered by this, you're done to me. You're done. I need you to have feature energy even when you're a headliner. That's our business. Yeah. Our business is like, yo, what's up? How you been?
Yeah.
How's the road? You run into a tell, and he'll be like, where you been? Where you coming from? Where you headed to? That's our business. We're all fucking late night comics. And the second you become this fucking standoffy cunt, I lose you, and I don't care about you, and I don't want to talk to you, and I don't want to be around you. Bo Burnham walked up to me. I was no one. I was absolutely no one and nothing, and he was the hottest item in the business. He just came up and he was like, hey, Bert, it's Bo. I'm at a ball. I go, Bo, I know who you are. And he's like, and he's tall. He's like 6'9". Yeah. So he's really disarming because you don't know he's going to be that tall. And he was like, how are you having a good festival? And I was like, yeah, man. And I was like, talk to him for a second. And then I think I even said, hey, thanks for saying hi. Because that's the business is like, you go to Montreal and you're nobody. Yes. And people are hot.
They rank. You can feel the ranking of
you feel the ranking. And it's like, yo, it doesn't take a lot out of your effort to make someone feel good. And look, it's a narcissistic business. But Bo Burnham, definitely, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I love Bo Burnham. I love Bo Burnham.
If you watch 8, which is a special they did, the story of this special is wild. So I didn't go to it, but I
would fuck him more as a Rough Rider than Nathaniel. Like, I think he's sexy like this. I love the open Tims.
I don't know if you've ever seen him in person. He is one of the most handsome people I've ever seen in my entire life.
I don't know. I couldn't stop staring at his chest hairs in the fucking, when he would like play with his gingerly thing.
Yeah.
It was a very distracting special. It was
very like bodily, right? He was like going like he goes like this a lot. He touches his neck.
And it was like I was like in the silk shirt and like the gold on his hand. I was like, I didn't hear one joke he said, being dead serious.
Yeah.
Because I was watching too much. And which I'm a guy who performs shirtless and I can take some distraction. But fuck.
But so they filmed this and people wrote stories. Jeffrey Gurian wrote a story who went to it about how it was one of the most uncomfortable, terrible tapings he's ever seen in his entire life. And people were tweeting about it. They're like, it was so weird. It took so long. He was barely audible. He would they said he would mumble jokes. He would retake jokes after saying it. He left people he would stop in the middle and restart things. And that was the reputation of the special before it came out. And then you watch it and you'd have no idea that was the case, but it has a really weird energy on purpose. It's like a really uncomfortable energy. And like it starts in the middle of the joke, it ends in the middle of the joke. So what was clear was him and Bo had an idea for the type of special they wanted to do. And then essentially created an experience with the audience for the tape to get, essentially treating them like actors to get the take they needed to then get the finished product they needed.
Okay. Now I'm rewatching Rothaniel.
So Rothaniel.
Oh, it's Rothaniel?
Rothaniel is the exact same type of thing they do here. There's a lot of manipulations in that you would have no idea because it just seems so like casual and verite or whatever.
Yeah.
But like that was, I think, 8 shows.
Wow.
Right? And here's my favorite example of how it is not as what it seems. Like actually it is like a manufactured idea to capture, in so much as this is supposed to capture how you can be uncomfortable with audiences and try to be in that space because it's like around the 2016 election where Rothaniel was about, oh, this is how intimate it can be with an audience. It was about that idea as much as actually doing it. But to capture that opening you talk about, you know how he's walking through the snow?
Yeah.
It wasn't snowing that night. I know a night they taped that. It wasn't snowing in New York that night.
So what?
So they either added snow in post or found a day of snowing, filmed him walking in the snow because that was what they wanted the special to feel like, coming in from the snow, taking your coat off, giving it to the person, and then essentially being welcomed in because it was all an idea they had for, we want to capture the feeling of the warmth and embrace of an audience and the collective blah, 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 blah.
Well, I would like to say that, Bo Burnham, you are no longer invited to direct anything I've ever doing because I'm not that smart. And I just be like, I'm not that smart. I just tell jokes. Like I really honestly just work on the thing that I say into the microphone and the thing I do on the stage. And that is really insightful. And it's brilliant. And I can respect that on the deepest fucking level because, you know, one of my favorite specials, it was a Comedy Central Presents, was Mitch Hedberg's.
Yeah.
And he was drunk and he fucked up and it took an hour and a half and they didn't get it and he fucking apologized. I think he started crying in it. Well, and then you know all of that. And then you watch it and it's put together perfectly. And all of a sudden, all these horrific moments in his life string together what looks like the coolest experience you've ever seen.
Yeah, because I think the taping audience is like this sort of weird thing. So they try to figure out a way.
Wow, that's really fucking goddamn it, Bo Burnham's and Jerrod Carmichael.
What I understand is, unlike most comedians who are like, I'm going to tour and I'm going to build back. They start with hold on. They started with the idea of the type of thing they wanted to capture.
Yeah.
Before essentially Jerrod started doing shows talking about being gay.
This is so like what's even better about this is I bet Bo Burnham and Jerrod Carmichael, when you said, did you see Rothaniel? And I paused and I went, yeah. I bet they went, we did our job. We got guys like Bert to stop watching during the snow so that we didn't have to deal with his comments on this fucking special. Because we knew that if we put enough snow, we're going to weed out all the fucking guys that don't read fucking books and don't listen to NPR and don't fucking donate to.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually something that I think I read about in the book because I don't want to keep on plugging the book. But when you were on my podcast, we were talking about Nanette and you're like, a lot of the comedians I love also try to push the buttons of the audience.
Yeah.
It's just the different types of buttons, right? It's like, I think of like Hannah Gatsby as a person like Patrice because like they both were like, fuck your good time.
That's a porn I would watch. Patrice and Nanette, or Patrice and Hannah.
Anyway, so
she pushed buttons.
Yeah, so they push buttons with that on purpose. But so Jerrod is doing though Rothaniel. So Rothaniel is structured not unlike Nanette, where it's like at first there's like a joke. He does like storytelling, like family stand up, and it's really good. And then out of nowhere, you're like, wait, there hasn't been like comedy for like the last 20 minutes, and it's just because Jerrod and Bo and certain comedians are like, comedy needs to evolve. Not every comedian has to be like me,
right?
But we have to. You got to expand it.
People have to do different shit also,
just so that there should be straightforward specials. But if it's only straightforward specials, then the art form will dry up.
I can't disagree with that.
Yeah,
I can't disagree with that. Yeah. That's really insightful, and it makes me. Like Drew Michaels did that.
Yeah.
Drew Michaels did that.
So Jerrod directed the first Drew Michaels special.
The one where with no audience, just a face.
Yeah.
The Max Headroom one.
Yeah, and I think Drew was like, it was an interesting idea, but maybe not the best. But like now Drew directs his specials, and like, I haven't seen it. But
do they do stand-up in clubs and stuff?
No, I don't know where Jerrod works. I think he might do some clubs, but like, a lot of it is like rooms, right? It's like, like Union Hall or Bell House in New York or something. Like it's like rooms that are not full alt, but like essentially like it's not a club.
So let's go back to what was the Marin?
So like I think in both cases, Marin, who believes in sort of that comedy can be button pushing this way, I think like was turned off or felt that all of these ideas were just sort of masking not just doing the job of being a comic, right? It's like
it could be argued that.
Yeah, I think like to me, you can say it's just value systems and taste, and it's ultimately being like, how should a comedian be doing all these things while still being a comedian, still doing the exact like they should still be doing essentially club comedy, but they can push all these directions. Or there's certain people who would be like, I don't need, there's no conventions that I have to adhere to. We can completely reinvent all of it. And I think Mark, in those conversations with Jerrod and Drew Michael, kind of would prefer stand-up still be stand-up and like maybe push forward a little bit, where I think Drew and Jerrod are like, why adhere at all to those things? I
agree with both of those people. I agree with Jerrod and Drew. By the way, you just turned me into a Jerrod Carmichael fan. Like I'm gonna watch. Yeah, I'm gonna rewatch both of those.
And if you know,
with a fine tooth comb, because first of all, no matter what I say in this podcast, I'm a fucking ride or die comedy fan.
Yeah,
you cannot you cannot do things different enough for me without me trying to figure it out and trying to love it.
Did you see the Little Ralph special that Jerrod directed?
Which one? The one in the
School
gymnasium?
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I told that to Lil Rel. It's one of my favorite specials ever.
It's one of the greatest specials ever.
And like, if we're talking about breaking rules, this is going to sound super silly to you, but like he was sweaty in it. That's a weird rule. Like that all of a sudden I didn't get distracted by his fucking sweat.
Because they figured out exact energy. I mean, they shot it in daylight.
They shot
daylight and the sunset.
It was so fucking good. Yeah. It was so fucking good.
So like that is like probably the most seamless example of all these things we're talking about. But like I think people, because I like this stuff, think I don't like regular stand-up. But like I like regular stand-up.
Define regular stand-up. Like
just like a special that looks like a Comedy Central special that like Comedy Central special, these are the 10 shots we have to have every special do.
Yeah.
And
see, but I can. Okay, so that is, I'm trying to think of the example. I'll immediately go to porn, but like that's the girl on girl stuff. It's like you can't deny it. It's everything you like, especially if it's done well. You can catch hints, but it's never gonna get you off, right? Like it's never gonna be like the thing that, because you're like, I need a little bit more, but like good joke writing is good joke writing, and there's been some people that have done their own little thing that way. Here's one thing that I have to say that I respect in what Jerrod and Bo and Drew are doing is sometimes you'll see a comedian try to push the boundaries. They don't know that they're not pushing the boundaries. They put on an affected voice. So my mom drove me here. And you're like, no, I know you think you're being different.
Yeah.
But you're actually a trope.
Yes, yeah.
And so
you think you invented being Emo Phillips.
Exactly. And I mean, and there's so many phases of that it pushes me towards that and the net, because ultimately that's what Patrice was doing, because Patrice was doing shit that when everything was inside the goalposts, and they were like, it needs to be this. Patrice was outside the goalposts, and so and there were a lot of people that did not like what Patrice did.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Even people that liked him would be like, I don't like what he's doing.
There were times that I was like, why do you need to tell that joke?
Yeah.
I really don't understand. You had them. They liked you.
Yeah. If you think of it, if you remove the idea of the audience should like you, and if you accept certain, it's like stand-up is an art form like anything else. It's also a job and it's a craft, right? It's like it's so funny. I laugh because you were like, I'll compare it to porn, where in the book I compare it to like, what's called post-structuralist architecture. And I was just like, wow, we have very different examples. We're getting to the same point, which is essentially like in the mid 20th century, people designed houses and buildings that were uninhabitable. Like you could not live in them. You could not walk. Because that guy was like, I just want to push architecture forward to make design more interesting. I don't care about the people.
Are you talking about The Fountainhead?
No, but it's...
Did you ever read The Fountainhead?
No, but it's
Howard Rourke was the guy that was like, yeah, I don't give a fuck about spires. They don't fucking serve the thing.
Yeah.
And so,
there's this guy, Peter Eisman. But like architects, like we think of sometimes as like comedians and narcissists. Like architects are like truly are like, will go above and beyond.
Can you say the thing you said again so they can Google it and I can read what you're talking about later? Because I love this.
Post-structuralist architecture.
Can you just send that to me? Post-structuralist architecture.
Peter Eisman.
Okay. So
am I the first person to bring up post-structuralist architecture
on this podcast? Yeah.
So... But it is...
African circumcisions have been brought up more on this podcast.
But the idea is that, like, stand-up is a job and it's a craft, and you're like, I'm here to entertain the audience. But it's also, you're expressing yourself.
Well, And
it's always a balance, and every comedian will have their own balance.
Everyone, don't ever tell anyone what to talk about on stage. Don't tell them how to do it on stage. Also, don't ever tell anyone what to wear on stage. That's the fucking most frustrating thing to me. What's crazy is I, for my money, I'm always a sucker for a good story. That's what I love in stand-up. I love a good story. I love vulnerability. I love oversharing. And I love and if you can do it without me realizing you did it, for you to change my mind on something. I love that in stand-up. I love when you hear a story. I think that's why I like Kumail so much.
Yeah.
And that's why I liked Dimitri Martin, and like just to hear other sides of the fence. Patrice, would argue the other side of a story that you didn't see, where you'd hear someone's perspective. Mike Epps was brilliant at that. I say Chappelle's brilliant at that. Like what it's like. When Chappelle says, I didn't grow up in the streets, but I won't disagree with it, or whatever he says. I've never contested that fact. I love that he shares that.
Yeah.
Because most people just assume, but I love that I love those little nuggets, and I love a truth that is so undeniable that like, you're like, that the person didn't write it, it just happened. When you share like that for me is my favorite thing. And so I think especially with Rothaniel, maybe I didn't want to be manipulated as an audience member.
Yeah.
I wanted to be shared with.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear the experience, and and that's all I really need stand-up to be for me. That's me.
Yeah.
But now I will go through and I will watch those.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right, because I think if you're that good at directing, or you're trying to do that thing, that is a certain wall of being from vulnerability, which is like, oh, we made a piece, right? And it's less access to the pain of it. It's more like the idea of it, right? It's more about he's like conveying what the emotional experience is like, opposed to just like, here it is. It's like spilling.
Do you remember when? Did you ever watch Anthony Jeselnik's special where he spent 30 minutes talking about a shark attack?
Yeah, the Thoughts and Prayers.
And I was like, I loved it. I wanted to be like, can you just do more of that, please?
He's so good at those things.
Yeah. He's
a
brilliant. He is the most brilliant joke writer. And by the way, I don't want to say this out loud because he's only when you run into him, he'll make fun of you for saying it out loud because that's who he is. And that's who he is. That's who he is. That is who he is to the core. But I mean, one of the best jokes ever fucking written in the world is the joke that he opened his last special with. My buddy's wife doesn't like me. The other day she came up to me and she goes, "You guys aren't allowed to hang out together." You know this joke?
No.
You guys aren't allowed to hang out anymore. And she goes, "No," because the other day he called me something that I know he must have heard from you. And he goes, "Did he call you a cunt?" And she goes, "No." And he goes, "Well, then he didn't hear from me." It's so fucking, I ruined that joke, but it's so good. And by the way, the only joke I think better than that is Dave Chappelle's kicker in the pussy.
Oh, it's so funny because I criticized that joke in the book. Well, I'll explain why, by
the way, I'm dying to read your fucking book now. You know this is going to be the only book I read this year.
You can listen to it.
Really?
Yeah, I record the audiobook, so you'll have to get used to this voice, but yeah.
I love your voice.
Oh, thank you.
What chapter is the Chappelle critique?
Chapter 8, which is also where I write about Anthony Jeselnik. Anthony Jeselnik has multiple of my favorite jokes. He's my favorite roast joke ever.
What's that?
Which is when he was on the Roseanne roast, he goes, when Roseanne was on, everyone on staff had to walk on eggshells around her because she would not stop eating eggs. And it's honestly I love roast jokes. It's my favorite roast joke.
Roast jokes are great.
And but the joke I have in there, he goes, "Who do you think was the first person to say? Who do you think was the first person to say the first million is the hardest? I think it was Hitler." So I use an example because I'm Jewish and I talk about like I think that's okay because I trust, like there's a lot of factors that make something offensive to you in that experience. But in that same chapter, I talk about that Chappelle joke, which that joke I'm fine with, but my overall critique was Dave Chappelle.
Hold on. Can I wonder what your critique is? Is it a device?
I think Chappelle, I think the best Chappelle, let me think of how I'd put it. I think it's like a little corny for how good of a comedian he is.
Oh, but that's what, can I tell you that?
But I understand, because what is nice about it is that he's going, you know what the punchline is, and you're still going to laugh at it because I'm going to get you to exactly the point to do it.
Yeah.
So I am fine with that joke. My problem with Chappelle formally, regardless of my political or my social disagreements with him, is that he does a lot of big windups to sharp turn punchlines now. Yeah. And I think that makes his act, if you're paying close attention, get a little repetitive just sort of sonically, regardless of the fact that he talked about the same topics over and over again, is that he is doing a lot of
We might be the first podcast Chappelle ever listens to.
Well, I write about him a lot in the book.
You write about him a lot in the book?
I write positive things about him, and I write this. I wouldn't even say it's negative. I mean, I do think it is reasoned, and I'd say, this is why, because he was one of the comedians that, Chris Rock, and then his 1999 or 2000, whatever that
Killing
year.
Him Softly.
Yeah, that was huge. That was maybe my favorite special ever.
So good.
And then I saw him it was between the first and second scene of the Chappelle show. I was going to the Comedy Cellar. He came in late night show. At the end of the show, they're like, "Oh, we have a drop in." It's Dave Chappelle. And he did 3 hours of sort of just hanging out, that thing. And it was amazing. I don't even know what he said, but I was like, wow, this has changed my understanding of what stand-up could be. So he's huge for me. And so I find it frustrating where I'm like, when you're being essentially like a shock comic, like that style of comedy is, I think, for a comedian less talented than Dave Chappelle. When you're doing long talking and then being kicker in the pussy in it itself is fine, but I feel like that a lot of his jokes have followed that path since. That is my critique of Dave Chappelle.
I enjoyed Kicker in the Pussy the same way I enjoyed Louis. Louis would say stuff like, a guy pulled up in the car next to me and was like, eat a bag of dicks. And then he was like, how do I even go about, like, Louis would take sometimes a very simple or almost like hacky premise, and he'd do it, and he'd be like, I'm so good, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, and it made me, it as a comic gave me the authority in my own act to explore everything and not have to write the precious stuff.
Yeah.
I love that joke because even as a professional comedian, I did not see the kicker in the pussy. I told you I'm dope. I loved it. You probably, being dead serious, will never hear a negative word come out of my mouth about Chappelle. Only because I had those epiphanous moments where I saw him when I was very young and stand up, or I was his age, but he was doing
new, and he was like 10 years in.
10 years in, and I was blown away at his ability to be in the pocket and so confident and so meandering and writing jokes, and he'd come up with so many new jokes of the day.
Yeah, I think of Dave Chappelle when people think of him as, like, when comedians say he's the best or greatest or whatever. I think of it as live in a club, just being there, being present, and just figuring out what the room is doing. I think where I think of, like, the best material comedian, like, I think Chris Rock is better at generating material. Through the process of using an audience to whatever. And
that's a hard one for me because Chris Rock's the reason I got into stand-up. Chappelle's the first person I saw that did it at that level. And those two guys, for me, I'm just.
But I think Chappelle, he's so good in a room that I think sometimes when he's in these issues that have got him negative feedback, it is because it's how could he know that people might have a problem with it? He's killing wherever he goes. Like, well, in the room, you're Dave Chappelle. You are the greatest at being in a room, maybe in the history of comedy. So it's going to be really hard to know what this joke sounds like to people not in this room.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying. Yeah. He's just...
And that's not, I don't think of that as necessarily a negative critique. It's like, the goal of the book is not like, this comedian's good, this comedian's bad. It really is like, oh, this is a different way to think of it. I don't care what you're paying.
Tom Segura in this book?
He is mentioned once in the chapter about Chappelle because when he was on my podcast, he talked about kind of finding it hacky to do the type of joke structure, which is like, they say you can't say this word, and then like trying to figure out how to do a joke where you say that word a bunch of times. Yeah. And when he was on my podcast, he was saying, I used to do that. And then I realized it's like kind of cheating and it's like kind of cheap. So like I use that as an example of like, there's a lot of people doing that type of joke.
Is this before the R word controversy or after?
In what regard? I don't even know which controversy you mean.
Never mind. Me either.
It was about, a lot of comedians do that, like do jokes that are like, I think it's okay to say that word. But like, and then insert the words you're doing. I mean, all they're doing is the Louis joke about saying the N-word. Yeah. Like everyone's still doing that joke he did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you're doing anything from 20 years ago, it's like maybe you should try to do.
This is why I love you. Because you are as thoughtful about the thing I love as I am. It's almost like you grew up with my wife and you were her best friend growing up, and all the things she does, you can explain why she does them to me. It's but
about comedy. As in your second wife, comedy.
Well, I might love comedy more than my wife.
Well, that's on you.
If you ask the internet, they think I'm cheating on my wife with Tara Manning. Yeah, they think that she licked my butthole and bought me a boat, which I like
the idea of asking the internet, not just like if you look at the internet, but like who's Bert cheating on his wife with?
The answer is Tara Manning. What other comics do you talk about in the book?
I talk about a lot. I mean,
what's my chapter about?
Huh?
Is my chapter Truth? Oh,
I was so excited because like when the Hassan Minhaj stuff happened,
yeah,
I was like,
hey, what did you think about his defense?
All of this is the most fascinating thing that's ever happened.
It's very fascinating. It's very fascinating. Okay, let's get into.
I honestly thought we might only talk about this, and we're already like however long.
Do you have a hard out?
No.
Okay, good.
But I was like, this is like the main thing I was going to talk to you about because the the story comes out, and I go like, wow, I have a chapter in my book about truth that I did not think any person would care about. And now this happens. And I'm like, oh, I can finally explain how truth works in comedy.
Yeah.
So I start talking about when I interviewed you, and you tell the story of telling the machine story, and realizing you're trying so hard to prove it was correct when really the audience needed a different ending. And and essentially you're like implying that like the literal truth was less useful to the audience than essentially the emotional truth, which is a proper ending. You didn't say emotional truth.
I did not say emotional truth.
But like,
I'm not smart enough to say emotional truth.
But you're like near that space. And then, as I explain in the book, I realized something about you, which is...
That's interesting.
So you're on my podcast. We talked for 2.5 hours or something like that. Then you talked about being on my podcast on Two Bears, One Cave. And you're perfectly nice.
Okay.
But in the retelling of the story, a fairly benign story about you appearing on some journalist podcast became this like larger than life podcast, like larger than life story about like, you know, usually they're only 45 minutes, but ours was 2 hours. Even
in telling the story of telling that story, I turn it into an emotional truth.
Yeah. So what I realize is like all artists stretch things. All people might forget things. Like the research shows like what we think of as our memory is just actually a manifestation of what we think happened in the past based on who we are currently. Yeah. And what happens with comedians is they filter their life through what would work on stage. As I described, you essentially have become a storytelling machine, which is like you live your life and the good story version of your life is what you remember.
That's all I remember.
So that is interesting. When you're like, well, what really happened is like, well, this is what it feels like it happened.
Yeah.
So, but then with Hassan, it's a different thing. But I thought it was so interesting that it's like,
I need you to feel what I feel in order to tell you how I felt. I feel like my feelings are very important to me. And so if I told you, like, this is a really interesting, it happened yesterday. And this is a 100% true story, but we did a 1 minute max on the assault bike yesterday. Sure. Me, my assistant Peter, and Nomi, my trainer.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what my max was. I ended up doing a minute at 35, and I'd never been more gassed in my life. Peter tried it, who's younger than me, should be in better shape, and he couldn't get within 8 points of mine. Sure. My trainer then did it and threw up. Mm-hmm. And that's the story that I need you to hear, right? Yeah. My trainer did it.
Yeah.
And Leanne, we're in bed last night. I go, Nomi did it, and she fucking threw up. And Leanne goes, oh my God, like what? That is horrible. And I went, yeah, I know. And then I left it, and we went to bed. And then Leanne found out that she threw up in the bathroom. She goes, I thought she threw up in the thing. And I said, I knew. I kind of felt that you felt that. And I didn't want to take that away from the story because it made it a little better. But she threw up in the bathroom. She goes, wait, did you see her throw up? And I went, no. She goes, so wait, how do you know she threw up? I go, well, she went to the bathroom. And then she told me she had taken vitamins, and that she told me and Peter she threw up. And she was like, hold on, but you didn't see her throw up. I go, well, no. And she's like, well, when you told the story, she was like throwing up as she did it. And I was like, well, yeah, I know. But like, I do that to Tom, will make me retell a story to him because he'll be like, hold on, hang on. Like I told a story about the 60th improv anniversary the other day. And as I'm telling it, Tom knows me well enough to go like, okay, like, because I'll tell a real, like something, especially comedy gossip, you know, like comedy gossip's pretty good. And Tom wants to know the truth of the comedy gossip. And but I'll tell you the story way fucking better. I'll tell you the story way better so that you laugh. That's all I give a fuck about.
Yeah.
Is like,
but that's an interest and that's not, that's how I think of comedians, which is either like that. So you laugh or you'll understand how I felt about it. And that is the standard for all artists, right? I'm going
to get in the weeds on this. So now here's where a lie loses me. Now, obviously, I will say this, and I don't know Hassan Minhaj, yes. but I like him, and I liked Patriot Act. I really liked Patriot Act. I enjoyed it the same way.
Yeah,
it's like seeing it from the other side of the fence. Is for me, I enjoy that type of stuff. I don't really care if they lied on Patriot Act about facts. I don't care because I don't really pay attention that much either. Like I'm like whatever. It was pretty funny and it was good, and I don't care. And this is really bad, but like I don't care if you tell me that fucking something about Saudi Arabia. I don't really care. Like I'm never going there, and
that's the radical opposite end of this argument, which is like I think comedians should lie even when they're telling the news.
But that's the part. What was so funny is my lying in comedy that pulls me is when it's a cartoonish, buffoonish lie.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go, well, it's kind of okay, never mind. Just go to your next joke.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people are like, oh, I understand like stretching the truth or lying if it's for the joke. And it's like, one, everything a comedian is doing on stage is part of the eventual joke. Even if there's 2 minutes of them being serious, that is all buildup, right? Yeah. Every comedian's doing that on purpose. But also like, often the lies that feel the worst are when you're like, that is so a joke. It feels yucky.
So blatantly, where you're like, and then 2 elephants rolled up and we jumped on and you're like, hold on,
and it cheapens the entire story before.
It cheapens the art form, in my opinion. Yeah. So that's what pulls me out. And I will say this, having said I like Hasan Minhaj, and I hope he appreciates that I said his name fucking right, as I will give him a subtle critique. I do not think it's fair in stand-up. I don't give a fuck about your TV show.
Yeah.
In stand-up, I do not think it's fair to manipulate feelings. I don't think
interesting.
I don't think it's fair to it's okay to manipulate feelings of like I need you to feel tense in this moment.
Yeah, okay.
But to tug on racial shit, that bothers me a little bit.
If it's not 100%
it's not 100% true. It's like you can't.
That's like honestly, that's like the most. That's what when progressive people are upset about it. That's their take as well.
Yeah, but like if D. Ray Davis said, I'm saying D. Ray because I'm a friend of mine and I just saw him the other night, so I know I'm a safe place. But if he said, I'm a descendant of slaves.
Yeah,
my grandmother worked hand in hand with Harriet Tubman, and then I was like, that's an amazing story. He's like, oh yeah, we're not even from Africa. I was like, what? Like that's when I feel lied to. That's when I feel lied to.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's so funny because that is when people are, I think, the first wave, which is just the story comes out. A lot of people I knew were upset because that when you do that, you run the risk of delegitimizing a lot of people's stories.
Everyone's stories. Yeah. Everyone's stories. If you're gonna make me, you can lie to me. If you're gonna make me laugh, you can lie to me if it's gonna enhance the laugh I'm about to get.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'm talking about stand-up. I'm not talking about Patriot.
Yeah.
Patriot, I don't really give a fuck. It's an entertaining show. I'm not going to write any of those facts down anyway. It's just like, just tell me a good story. It's TV.
Yeah, but I think
Fox is doing it. CNN's doing it. They're all doing it.
Yeah.
The Daily Show, I guess, is supposed to be news. I don't know who watches fucking Comedy Central. Fucking everyone's up in arms. Does anyone watch The Daily Show? Is that a thing still?
Yeah, it does all right. Okay. So apparently this is
scrap that. Let's go back to Hasan.
Well, like Trevor Noah's version, people are like, I don't know anyone watches. Like, yeah, it's for the same. Remember how old you were when you watched The Daily Show? Yeah. Those people watch Trevor. Yeah. You are now older than their
He's got a podcast now.
Trevor?
Yeah.
He's a great talker.
He's by the way, sweetest dude in the world.
I just, it's like, I thought he's an okay comedian. I
think he's a really talented comedian.
He's really talented, but like he's not. I just meant in terms of like personal preference. But when he does panels, I'm like, this guy is.
Oh, he's quick. He's
like a great.
He's been with it for a long time. Yeah. But that's my problem with truths in stand-up is when you manipulate people's feelings about racial stuff. That's when you lose me. So then I go, now we can't trust anybody. Now we definitely can't trust you. So I don't even want to hear you talk anymore. And I learned that in my first 6 months of comedy. I had a joke about a fight I had witnessed in freshman year, and I told it, it's just a very long time ago. It was 25 years ago. So forgive me for what I'm about to tell you. It was a fight between 2 kids that didn't go well. And then there was an Outkast song and there was a phrase in it, who wants to fuck with Hollywood Court?
Okay.
And I liked that phrase. And so I put that in. And then as I put it in, I made the kid I made one of the kids a special needs kid.
Mm.
And then it turned into a fucking hilarious story. It was a really good story now because now one of the kids who, by the way, wasn't special needs, but is dead now. But, you didn't need to know that. But, and so I got done. I did it one night and it murdered so fucking hard. And I got done and I was like, I'm like moving forward to stand up. I went down to the Bargatze and a guy who at the time booked Aspen came up to me and was like, that story is fucking spectacular. And I was like, oh, thanks. And he said, is that true? I didn't know that you couldn't lie on stage. And I went, no, not at all. I wrote it. And he goes, what do you mean you wrote it? I said, none of it's true. I said, I witnessed a fight in high school, but and he goes, well, wait, hold on. There wasn't like a special need. This is back when you could say the R word really aggressively, which made it really funny. Yeah, and you could use stereotypes of like they're stronger than gorillas. And like you could and so it was, and then he goes, none of that's true? And I was like, no. And I thought he would say, wow, you're a genius writer. And he went, oh. And the look in his face was like, oh. And he was like, okay, all right. It was good meeting you, man. And he just left. And I went, why did he do that? It was a great story. He liked the story. And then I was like, oh, he wanted it to be true because he believed it. Yeah. And then I was like, and so if you start lying on stage, then all of a sudden no one's going to believe you. And then your value's gone. Yeah. And so then the next story I wrote was take an acid and go to Disneyland. And I was like, and it was very based in truth. And I was like, all right, I got to keep it. Like I can make things outrageous, but they have to be grounded in the truth of this story. It's the, I mean, and it's the big problem I had with The Machine was that it was so easy to tell on radio and to Rogan because it was not punched up. It was just the story and it's an outrageous story. And I can leave it. Yeah. But on stage, what I did on that radio, what I did on Rogan's show, you cannot do on stage. You can't just take podcast stories and tell them on stage. Stage has a different expectation. They expect you to dance a little harder. And so I was not prepared to either to do the work or to get away from the truth. When it's your story, you are married. I am, as a stand-up comedian, I'm married to the truth. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to write out of that truth. Like another comic can see what you're doing and very quickly go, you know what you need to do? What? You need to get rid of the fucking other guy. And you're like, huh? You're like, it's distracting. I don't need to know. Yeah.
It's almost always the most common manipulation or thing a comedian does is condense the amount of people in the story.
Do you talk about Louis in the book?
Yeah.
Like
so he's in the same chapter you're in. So
fuck.
This is my feeling about Louis, and I think some people will see it as I don't think I write really negatively about anyone in the book in terms of like it, but I would say like obviously there's sort of negative skew to Louis, but it's mostly about what people perceived Louis of before the story came out, which was like, I don't know if you remember what the press was like towards Louis pre-2016. It was like, he's the greatest comedian ever
lived.
And he's the most honest man that's ever existed.
Yeah.
And that perception of a comedian, so I use him as an example of, it's interesting we thought he was always telling the truth on stage. Because like, there's examples where he talked about like, I don't know, I'm not telling the truth on stage. Like there's, I don't know if you watched, I'm sure you watched it, but you remember Talking Funny, the thing he did with...
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So there's a moment where, it's a very interesting moment because Jerry Seinfeld says, this is my favorite one of your jokes, Louis. And then he does the joke, but it sounds like a Jerry Seinfeld joke. And Ricky goes like, see, that's the difference between you. Like, Jerry, you say jokes, but I don't even think Louis writes anything. I just see a guy falling apart for my pleasure on stage. And Louis goes, yeah, that's how my little kid sees it. I'm doing everything. I know all the moves. It's just like, that's the act that I'm pretending to be doing that thing. So like, I use him an example to be essentially like one, like his example of honesty is like maybe not the best definition of when we think of like, what does it mean to be honest on stage? And then I try to explain like, maybe these are more useful definitions, like being vulnerable in certain ways, blah, blah. And also to talk about how for certain people, once you don't trust him anymore, it's hard to then be a fan of him, right? I think there's a certain amount of, and certain people are fine with him, right? Still, but like he's huge. He still plays Madison Square Garden.
I'm still friends with him.
Yeah. But like, there are people that
He still says Madison Square Garden.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's not like
he just did. I think he did 2 shows.
Yeah, so it's like he used to be able to do 4 shows, whatever. So then, but like, there's people that I think.
I mean, you got to take a hit, you know.
Yeah, but there's people that like you, and so there's a quote which is like, it's less about he lost fans because of what the accusations are that he admitted to or whatever, as much as like it's hard to be a fan of a person that used to held up to a certain standard as like the most truthful thing that's ever happened. And then you find out that maybe he wasn't telling the exact truth about everything. It's hard to, and not unlike what you're saying with other comedians.
So it's the Aziz thing.
Yeah.
Did you write about Aziz?
No,
Well,
but
but Aziz. Well, by the way, that was just a straight hit piece. I don't think that was a journalist.
Yeah,
that wrote it.
that I don't think
that was just a straight hit.
Yeah,
piece.
that one I remember when that came out. People being like, "This is not how you're supposed to."
Jane.com.
It doesn't exist anymore. People are like, "This is not how you're supposed to write
buy
this."
it. Someone buy it. Jane.com, and we're gonna put it to a Aziz Ansari fucking tribute page.
Yeah. But it was like we're like, you're not supposed to do the story like that. One, because it's not as coverable, and also it's somewhat unfair to the victim to describe them this way. Like when you write those stories, you're supposed to do it in a way that like is protecting everyone involved in certain ways, and that story was sort of felt offhand and.
But it was also, and I think this is what I think this is what you're saying. Like I've always had a thing. Like it's a joke, but my wife is the safest woman in America. Like I'll never cheat on her. I'll never be disingenuous to her, because if I do, I'll lose all my fans. I know that. I know that.
Yeah.
And so because I preach one thing on stage, if you see a video of me shaking my kid outside of a car, and going fucking come on, then all of a sudden everything I say on stage is gone.
Yeah.
So because I tell you I'm who I am, I tell you everything about me. I tell you that I love my kids. I love my wife. I think my kids are fucking stupid. But you know that's in love.
Yeah.
I say that my wife's getting old or whatever. All my jokes, but you know that where those intentions are coming from are and coming from a loving, sweet place. The second you see the other side of that, I'm ruined. Now,
100%.
I would say the same thing happened, and I respectfully, I do not know Aziz, but I will say that what I think happened to him was a branding issue. His brand was, I'm a woke bae. I go on things. I do pronouns right. And I don't even know if pronouns were around yet, but like,
they were around, but I understand.
I do pronouns right. But then behind closed doors, I'm like doing this. And I think that is, you only get canceled if you fuck with your fans. Your fans can cancel you. And so like Louis' fans, half of them are like, yeah, he talked about fucked up shit on stage.
Yeah.
The other half were the ones, what we were talking about, where you say, sometimes it's easy to sell a fucking, like, it's like all of a sudden, if Nate Bargatze comes out and he doesn't have an accent, then all of a sudden,
or like went to Harvard or whatever.
Yeah, he went to Harvard and you're like, what? And he was like, just so you know, I voted for Biden. And they're like, what the fuck? Yeah. Like, that's when
I think he has to convey, I don't vote in a way that's no one, like, I think he literally can't. His line is being almost political at all. Like I think even let's say I have no sense of his ultimate leaning in terms of like where he would vote, and I don't know if he does. But like
Nate doesn't strike me as someone who votes.
Yeah, so I imagine there's even people who whatever on his side will be like, well, I'm not coming here for that. Like I do think he captures a certain amount of America's desire to like have a place where I'm not coming here for that, right? I think you can project a certain amount, and he's just talking about like being a person and like what is it like being dumb? Like there is a sort of purity to it, and I think there's a lot of comics that the Hassan thing is not unlike a branding issue in terms of like, oh, he's like a journalist person. Well, like and sometimes it's in your control and sometimes it's not, because comedians often like to be maximize being famous. They will lean into if people are like, you're so honest. Very few like, actually I'm not, like like they'll accept being called that in profiles or something like that. But I think it is,
or even it backfires with woke people.
Yeah,
your branding issue. Patton Oswalt, very woke, very liberal, took a picture next to Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
And his fans were like, that's it, unfollowed, dead to me. And you're like, well, he didn't but it's a branding issue.
Yeah,
It's bombing on the highest level. Sometimes you'll tell a joke, like I said last night, where I said fingering a pussy, and it's a bomb joke, but it's like, it's a very small level.
Yeah.
But when you bomb on a high level, and all of a sudden I'm in the fucking Cayman Islands on a boat screaming at my wife, "You're a fucking whore. No one trusts you." And then all of a sudden that video comes out. That's a huge bomb.
Yeah.
Because you're like, everyone's like, it puts a face on something that they didn't believe. And then they go, "Oh, now I have to believe that. I can't unsee that."
Well, it's so comedy is rooted in the same, we laugh the same reason chimpanzees laugh. So
I made a gorilla laugh one time.
Yeah, which is they laugh, and their laughter is not unlike human, which is like you trust the person is not there to hurt you, right? So it's like you see monkeys laugh, it's because they're like rolling around or something like that.
Yeah,
we're doing a thing that is like roughhousing, but in a playful way because I trust you and I feel safe with you. That is really useful or necessary for comedy to work. So when you don't trust them anymore, no matter how good your joke is, it doesn't matter because you're not in the right state to receive it. Like the audience is as important for a comedy show to work as the comedian in so much as they have to be generating the space for comedy to exist in.
Let's go back to the book. You when you sit down to write the book, what was your like your main stroke of like, I want to do a book about
this? Yeah. So the goal was, first it started with, I did a ranking of every Adam Sandler movie 4 years ago.
Ooh. Is it online?
Yeah. It's
pull
like
it up.
25,000 words long. And
okay, pull it down.
Well, you can still, but you still.
There's a list, right?
You can still
Number one, Happy Gilmore.
No.
Okay.
I guess, keep on guessing. I'll see. Give 5 guesses.
Number one, Billy Madison.
No.
Number one, My First 100 Dates.
50 First Dates. No.
50 First Dates. No, it's not Zoltan.
No.
The Wedding Singer?
No. Nope. I love it. I haven't got to talk about this list in a while.
My favorite Adam Sandler movie. It's not going to be.
Don't look and then scroll down because I want to see the response of when he sees it.
It's not going to be Adam and Eve.
It's Jack and Jill.
Jack and Jill. It's not going to be the Precious Gems.
Nope.
It's.
I can't even remember what.
Is it Airheads?
No, Airheads is like pretty low on the list. It's an enjoyable movie, but he's barely at the height of his powers.
I'm the one with him and Marlon Wayans.
No, that's Damon Wayans.
Damon Wayans?
Marlon Wayans was like a 14-year-old at the time. That movie's bad. That movie is really bad because they shot it as an R and then they re-edited it to be PG-13.
My favorite Adam Sandler. You've got me.
It's Click.
For real?
Yeah. So the goal of the list.
Nick Swartzen wrote that.
Really?
I think so.
So that's like, I mean, everyone does it pass, right? So like the goal of the list was I'm going to watch every movie in a row. And because Adam is so, and I write about this in the book, but like Adam was so often hated by film critics.
For real?
Yeah. Like he gets the worst reviews.
It makes me feel so good.
And then I was like, well, what happens if you watch all of his movies in a row and try to evaluate them, not from the
Waterboy,
from the perspective of cinema, but from the perspective of all the other Adam Sandler movies.
Billy Madison's number 4.
100 Love number 3.
What's number 3? It's got to be Happy Gilmore.
No, Wedding Singer's number 2.
Wedding Singer's fucking awesome.
So then, it's done. Click's number 1. So the idea is.
So can you tell me who wrote Click?
It's one of those things where it's because of Adam rewrites all of his movies. It's like
anger management.
It's all like it's pretty. Anger management's really funny. It really holds up.
Really funny.
But like, it's always like a WGA thing of like who writes which draft. But that is a movie that feels like it has the most of like what Adam was trying to do in any of his movies.
Really?
In both, it's funny in his ways.
Oh no, it was written by.
Yeah, but that means sure Adam did pass because I talked
Corn
to
is fucking amazing.
But
Steve Corn wrote Bruce Almighty.
Yeah, and I talked to Frank, which was like it was around when they were getting married and his dad died, and it was someone about that. Anyway, it's just sort of like about his ideas of being a grown-up, which a lot of his early movies were about. And then a lot of his later movies were about being a parent, and you see him in this sort of crux of it. And it's like, he's funny in it, but also like, it's when you start seeing his goal of like really just having his friends score. It's really great. But so I did the list, and I was like, "Can I write a book that's just this?" And he's like, "No." My agent was like, "No, you can't do that for a variety of reasons." But like, so he's like, "This is what you should do," which is like make a list of ideas you have about comedy and comedians you could write longer about because of a story, blah blah blah. And then so what materialized was a pretty like not unlike what are the chapters now, which is like here are the sort of areas. It's not like stand up or sketch, which is like when people think of like forms of stand up, but like the conceptual parts of comedy that are like essential to like how comedy works as an art form and or as a cultural force, right? So it's like there's a chapter about audience, there's a chapter about truth, there's a chapter about laughter, there's a chapter about context, there's a chapter about
Politics,
which is sort of like the political force and how that works. And that chapter is about like this idea of like, what does comedy do? Right? I think you hear that a lot, which is like, why doesn't comedy do anything? It's like, what is the expectations for comedy? So like the idea was there's this pretty famous book and TV show called Ways of Seeing, which was a art critic wanted to like guide people into how to look at art differently. And I was like, can I do that for comedy? Which is not change people's opinions about what they like or not like, but just change how they think about the comedian in a way that they can hopefully have a deeper relationship to it.
So what's Community about?
So it's about, conceptually, it's about how comedy is useful for creating in-groups and out-groups. And like, because of that ability, it's like a useful way of like bringing people together. Okay. And sometimes those communities can be uplifting. Sometimes those communities can be harmful. Also, sometimes and it's also about post the internet and social media that in many ways, like the fan bases of comedians have like overridden the comedians themselves.
Do you talk about podcasts in the book?
Yeah.
What do you say?
What do I say about podcasts? I talk about it in terms of in the community chapter. It's so funny that we keep on end up circling chapters per time. So like I talk about it because like podcast fans have a different relationship to previous comedy fans. And part of it is that they feel invested in the show. Like the example I use, is like I listen to Comedy Bang Bang. And like Comedy Bang, it's
Paul Ackerman?
Scott Ackerman.
Scott Ackerman, my bad.
But like there are people who create content for it. Like he uses on the show.
Yeah. And
I use it as an example of like modern fan. When we thought of fans in the past, it was like there's the star on top and then it was top down. This is to be a fan of Bert, it's this. Where now fandom for you comes from the people up and you're just the thing that they are fans around, but the community exists somewhat unrelated to you. It's as much the interactions. So like, I think that is this podcast have created that in particular because in some ways they're so intimate with the host that intimacy then you want to share. You're like, oh, that's my friend, the host. Well, I can't interact with Bert. He actually is famous and he's doing this. So like I'll and then I think that's how I talk about it largely in that. I also talk about it in this way, which is, so I do a longer version of the type of article that you criticized about me the first time about how funny comedy needs to be. And I say, I mentioned that Joe Rogan made fun of that article as well. But I say like in many ways, like Joe is doing that as well. Like if you listen to Joe Rogan's show, it is a comedian who has the #1 podcast in America. And like, he's not like being laugh out loud funny for most of the show. Like I'm sure but a lot of it's just sort of fucking hanging out.
Yeah.
And like, that's the same thing I'm talking about when I say like, there are TV shows where there's fewer laughs. Like there is a willingness to consume comedians being themselves without the need for constant feedback.
This is going to be fucking huge. I'm a comedy fan.
Yeah.
And I'm a comedy fan.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of yours. And even though I may not agree with you on certain things, I love hearing everything. Anyone that doesn't, I just don't get it. And I cannot wait. This will be the one book I fucking read. Book on Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get through The Wager. It's a book by David Gran. But this one will be the first one I read, and I'll read it so fucking quick.
Yeah.
Much like I watched Chappelle's special, I'm going to go, I wish there was a second one. There is?
Well,
what's the sequel?
I don't know. I said, like, I want to see if people want this book, right? Like, it's not even just like because of the money. It's like really a matter of like, it's a lot of, this book is exactly how I write and think. And if people go, we're not really interested in that, then I'm not going to write a book that's exactly like this.
But you already know.
I know certain people, and look, I've had really good response from comedians.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not only writing books for comedians.
Here's a weird question.
Yeah.
And I hope this doesn't sound defensive, but do you talk about any alternative comedians?
I literally can't tell if you're joking or not.
Like, you talk about Tig?
Yeah, man, I talk a lot about alternative comedians.
Like who?
Like a lot. I literally can't tell if you're criticizing because I must talk about them a lot. That's what I assume, right?
No.
Oh, I'm like, I have money. One, I love alternative comedy. Yeah. But also, like, I was right. The second chapter is about an audience, and I talk about how in the 1990s, when supposedly the comedy boom was over, there was a rise in black comedy clubs and alternative comedy at the exact same time out of Los Angeles. And I loved spending time learning about that time. It was so exciting to just know what it used to be like when there was no internet and people were creating their own rules, and like everyone had such a specific context of like what they were talking about. And you'd hear about shows where like, like people would be talking about dating another person who was on the show, and they'd be going up for the first time ever. Like that energy of, we're so connected to our audience that we're all working on this together. And I like the process of writing comedy and a comedian coming up with new material that's good and really being open to the audience. That's like honestly what I want from a comedy show, which is why I lean to going to alternative rooms where the audience is more likely to accept not being entertained at all time, but willing to be like, oh, we're going in a different path. So I talk about that, but then I talk about Maria Bamford probably the most in the book.
I love Maria Bamford.
Maria, I talk about Tig, Margaret Cho. I talk about I guess if you count Marin, I don't know if like it's so.
Marin's an alternative comic.
Yeah,
he's a part of the boom.
Yeah. But he goes back and forth. But like, it's also because alternative comedy.
I think ultimately, Marin's the definition of just comedian. Like he's just a great comedian. Patton is you can say he's an alternative comedian. He was part of the boom, but he's just a great comedian.
Yeah, I think
same with Maria Bamford. Yeah. Now there's people that there's people that if they look at who Maria Bamford follows on social media, they'll be like, yeah, she's not my style. If you look at that, if you're going like, yeah, I don't like those guys.
Yeah.
Then yeah, sure, but then you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Maria Bamford, when she did the I think it was like super deluxe special of her
and her parents.
It's undeniable. And she is. I just texted her, DM'd her the other day about how fucking special she is. She was talking about her mom.
Was it about on Corden?
Was it? No, it couldn't have been. It was in. I might have. Is it?
It's the end of the book is about that set she does in Corden about her mom passing away.
Did you just have Maria Bamford on your podcast?
No. No. I interviewed her recently, but no. She's been on. She had put out a book, so she did up a bunch of podcasts.
No, she was talking about her. By the way, it could have been fucking years old.
Oh God!
What happens on my phone is, as I fall asleep, it just shows up, and it was about her mom passing away, and her mom always had issues about her weight, and her mom looked at the coffin, was like, "That's too big. I'm not going to fit in that." And Maria's like, "Well, don't worry, Mom. Your hips will get smaller in there." And she's like, I think my mom would be happy to know she's down to a pound now.
Yeah.
Like it was fucking, she's just so fucking.
Yeah. At the end of the book, I write about, she talks about her mom on, I literally can't talk about it without crying. It's like, it is, I say like she's the second greatest comedian of all time. To me, it's Richard Pryor and Maria Bamford are the two greatest comedians.
Maria Bamford.
Because to me, it's not just, they do everything that a stand-up can and should do, both in terms of what they talk about, but also like skill set, right? It's not like Richard can be dirty, Richard can be really personal, Richard can talk about societal, like but also Richard can do lots of voices. And that's the thing. Like Maria can do all the things. And so it's like when I think of like the pinnacle of stand-up, it's like it's Richard, it's Maria, then everyone else is after that. Like,
right, where am I on that list?
I'll rank. I don't know. You're good.
20.
You're about 20.
I'll take it.
When you say like goodness or best, all those things where it's subjective, I have a very hard time because it's really a matter of you're creating a value system and you're saying what is greatness. And so like that's why I always say like Maria and Richard Pryor, when I say they're the greatest, I'm essentially just being like, my only thing that I'm comfortable saying is like, well, this is to my value system, what comedy looks like is these two people and everything should be measured against it. And like, because you tell stories, you have your shirt off, right? So it's like, how do you compare you to a person who does one-liners with their shirt on? Like you can, but like, what if you don't have the attention span for someone to tell the full story?
You can't really compare like...
You can, but it doesn't say anything about the artist as much as it does to the person having that conversation, right? So if I say, oh, like, I love Bert, his things are like 20 minutes long, I'm not really saying anything about how good you are as much as I'm communicating what I think is good comedy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm better than Jeselnik.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Well, Jeselnik can do those stories. He decides not to, though.
Yeah, fucking, that was a good special he did. I really liked it.
Yeah, I saw him. I got COVID when I did it, but I saw him recently, and he was hosting, so he did a thing, a set up top, then he did a story in the middle, but then in between, and he did a story, and it was great. In that same vein, he goes, "We never did that before. I guess I should keep on doing that story." I was like,
"Well, that's the best stories you do, or the ones that you're just telling because you're trying to kill time."
Yeah, and
someone's like, "Yo, have you ever done that before?" And you're like, "I have no idea."
Well, I just love. I mean, as I said, I love new material. I love that feeling of a person doing something for the first time.
Like, you would have loved my act last night if you like unfunny new material.
Yeah, I just like
little like last night. I literally
would like
said
them
to
to be
guy,
funny, but like it's just like when the audience and the comedian are at their best, where we're paying attention and we're really figuring it out.
Yeah,
and like I think you can get to something like a more truer expression of yourself and them, and a truer connection than like when you get to material, which is a good show and there's value to that. There's value to like, I had a hard week, I'm just going to see a comedian. I know they're going to do the job.
Yeah.
But like, it's also cool that like, oh, it's a Tuesday. We're like going to both bring ourselves to it. Like the book is as much about trying to make audiences better as it is trying to make comedians better.
Oh, interesting.
Like, as I say, it goes better ingredients, better pizza. I go better audiences, better comedians. If an audience has a better understanding of how it works, one, it's going to make it harder to be a hack, but also like...
Well, then we don't want that because some of us are making a pretty good living off of it.
Oh, come on. Come on. But it is like...
Do you feel like there's too many specials right now?
I think I thought that a few years ago just because it was new to there be so many. And now it's just a different paradigm of like, it's weird. The term special is so funny because it's a term that's just from the past of how we thought of television, where if it's not a series, it was called a special. It was just like the nature of, and now comedians like adapted that term to be like, I'm doing it because it's special, then whatever, it's not special. But like, I would like people to spend more time on their acts.
I think that's the biggest. I
would like some comedians too. I think there's some comedians who, if their act is less about time and more, or rarely, there's a comedian who it locks in on it. Like Ali Sadiq currently.
He's great.
He just is in a space that like you can put out a lot of stuff right now and I think it's really going to work. But like that happens to like one comedian at a time, like every decade, where a comedian's just like on it, where they don't have to grind it out. They're just like in the face with like everything that flows through them is ready. Like Kyle Kinane can do that a lot. Where it's like, I saw him right after a special came out. He goes, cool, I have one more. And he tells a 45-minute story about moving to a new house in Oregon.
Yeah.
And it's like a new, and I was like, you essentially riffed a one-person show.
Kyle Kinane's pretty special.
Yeah.
Pretty special in the special sense of special. Like he's a...
So it's like, I get why you're doing it and it's so much cheaper to film them, so you can put them up on YouTube and all of it's easier. But like,
it's almost like I would like some people to still remember that like you can spend a lot of time on. You don't have to film a special because you're 7 years in. You can wait until you're 11 years in. Like you look at half hours from 20 years ago, and it's like a person who's been doing it for 25 years. It's the first time on television. You're like, this is A material.
That's why I think that's why people have such a fondness for Geraldo and Patrice, and especially because they're not here anymore. Is that these few things you saw of them doing stand up? I think still people think that's all I get.
Yeah.
They've been doing stand-up 20 years.
Yeah. Geraldo was one of my favorite comedians growing up. It's like Geraldo was the first like person I saw on Comedy Central. It's why I learned what the Comedy Cellar was. Like, I liked Geraldo, so I watched Tough Crowd. I watched Tough Crowd, so I learned what the Comedy Cellar was. So I went to the Comedy Cellar.
Was so great.
And it like aged, I was a 15, 16-year-old. Like, I gotta go to the Comedy Cellar one day. And this is like this is when the Comedy Cellar was, they had to use online. I don't even know what the internet looked like at the time, but essentially you can get discounted tickets. You get free tickets. You just had to pay cover. And I was like, and we'd go all the time. But like,
this when Brody was working the door?
I don't know. I mean, I was I was 15. I didn't know who Brody was or whatever.
What year is it?
It was probably 2002, 2003, 2004.
Okay, he was in LA. Do you write about Brody in the book?
No.
You ever see Brody?
I think I saw him one time. I think I used to go to Comedy Death Ray a lot when I lived in LA. I think I saw him there.
Brody was fucking, like when you talk about when you talk about the 1,000 greatest comics, you got to put Brody and guys like Brody and Todd Glass that have always just done their own fucking thing.
Yeah.
That like Todd Glass is just genius.
And just, I mean, like I remember seeing Todd for the first time at Comedy Death Ray and just like how silly he was with the audience. You're like, to get the entire audience to be like, we're locking into this, like, it's like being a little kid.
One of my favorite Todd Glass stories, and by the way, texts from Todd Glass are hilarious.
Yeah.
Being in Todd Glass's universe, we did a Zoom with Todd yesterday, and Leanne knows Todd, but she doesn't get the Todd I get.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, all right, well, it was a great Zoom. Just so everyone knows, I always end every Zoom with a bit. So this is my guy. This is an impression of my guy who knocks over his Zoom camera but doesn't realize it's still on. All right, thanks, everyone. Hey, guys, it was great doing a meeting with you, Leanne. You look lovely. Thank you so much. And then he knocks the camera over, and he starts the bit. And Leanne got caught up in the bit and she didn't know. And then everyone stayed on the Zoom, and he just kept with it, and we're all fucking laughing. He's like, motherfucker, cocksucker. Like, and Leanne's like, I go to hit leave, and she goes, no. But he did a bit I still think of so much. I think of this so much. At the Brea Improv back in the day, or the Irvine Improv back in the day, he said, don't give me the light. Just have them start cleaning up. So instead of getting the light, the guy came out and started vacuuming. And Todd goes, hey, I'm doing a show. And the guy goes, oh, show's over, Todd. And he's like, what? And he just turned the vacuum on. I was like, how about I'm trying to do that energy. That's what I fucking love about. That's what I love about comedy. Congratulations on the book, brother.
Well, thank you so much.
I hope it's a bestseller. I hope everyone fucking goes out and gets it. Continued success.
Thank you.
Keep doing what you're doing. I love it. Thank you for doing the podcast. Everyone get the book. Comedy book, comedy book, comedy book, comedy book, comedy book, comedy book, comedy book. Jesse David Fox, thank you for doing my podcast.
Thank you for having me.